Hey, what's up? Silas here. Some of you may be coming to this video from one of the two videos of black privilege or black oppression in one word. So this little adult language warning, that word is going to be nigger, and I'm going to be saying that a couple of times in this video as I discuss the term and why I made that video and some thoughts around that. So from dictionary.com, it was saying the term nigger is now probably the most offensive word in English. Its degree of offensiveness has increased markedly in recent years, although it has been used in derogatory manner since at least the Revolutionary War, and that's the American Revolutionary War. The senses labeled extremely disparaging and offensive represent meanings that are deeply insulting and are used when the speaker deliberately wishes to cause great offense. It is so profoundly offensive that a euphemism has been developed for those occasions when the word itself must be discussed, as in court or in a newspaper editorial, the N-word. Despite this, the sense referring to a black person is sometimes used self-referentially among African Americans in a neutral or familial way. The sense referring to other victims of prejudice, especially when used descriptively as to denounce that prejudice, is not normally considered disparaging, as in the Irish or niggers of Europe, or from Rudy Doyle's The Commitments, but the other uses are considered contemptuous and hostile. So right here, why would a term now be considered one of the most offensive terms in English? And I think this is due to the fact that people have understood that yes, this is no longer an accurate term. It's no longer accurate to refer to these group of people that way. Think about if you're religious, if you believe in religion, let's say Christianity, for example. If you're talking about the devil, which is considered subhuman, embodiment of evil, a very negative thing, you can say pretty much any word, any term you want about the devil, and it's not considered to be highly offensive because the target is the devil. So it says something about society, about how general society, or people using this, people who wrote this, the understanding that you have to use the N-word in this situation, or people use the N-word in this situation, in certain situations, is due to the fact that they no longer consider this term to be anything close to accurate when discussing the people it's normally referred to as. So that says they consider black people not to be this subhuman group that they was used at. Now, as they say with this Irish or black people, I mean the Irish are the black people of Europe, are the niggers of Europe. This is one thing I experienced when I was in Italy. There was a notice that people in Europe said that the Roma people, which are the Gypsies, which are the Romanians in general, they're considered niggers in Europe in some places. I think in Russia and Eastern Europe, they're considered niggers. And they have different people who are called this term in different ways. So it's not necessarily just something used in the United States of America against people who are black. Now, when it comes to usage of the N-word, I kind of wonder, why do people say N-word? Because when you say N-word, you're still invoking that word in somebody else's mind. It's not like they're actually thinking like, oh yeah, no, that's you're talking about nobody, or you're talking about never, or you're talking about maybe like nowadays. Nowadays is another word I don't like, but that's for another video. But back to the topic. So why do people say that? Why do people say N-word? It's like, I'm not going to say the word, but I'm going to evoke it in your mind. Just try to find a different way to avoid saying the word. But I guess, yes, if you're writing it down and somebody said something, if you're, let's say, describing this is something that somebody called somebody else and you have to write that down in court, you say N-word instead of the actual word. I think the actual word should just be said at that time. And I also have another question now when it comes to the usage of that term. Myself, as somebody that was born in France, and I moved to Kenya, and then I moved to the United States, back to Europe, and now I'm not necessarily considered African American. So if this term is used within African Americans in a familial way, should I be able to use that term to talk to other African Americans? Why? My ancestors, for what I know, were not involved in that slave trade. For what I know, I haven't really been subject to that much level, to those kind of levels of oppression or social inequalities that some claim this term is allowed to be used within. Now, if you have somebody who's come up from their situation, whatever situation they had, and they've come up and they're in a higher place in society and they've overcome different struggles or just had a life, should they account for them using that word? And I'm not quite sure of that. My one experience with this term was I was in one of the campuses of the school that I attended in Italy. It was in a Roman campus, and the first day I'd gone there, I had met somebody who was one of the groundskeepers. He was, I think, a recent immigrant from Senegal or something, and we talked a bit, and I was like, yeah, my people are from Kenya, and etc., etc. And we just had a small little moment as I was in the courtyard taking a break from working in the one of the computer labs. The next day, I'm in the courtyard again, and then I just hear somebody yell, "My nigga!" And then it's just kind of like that term itself does have certain things to it. You've been told this is a word that people normally use when they're trying to hurt you, when they're trying to be racist towards you. I'd previously thought of things like, okay, someone like Eminem, who's a rapper that came up from Detroit, the 8 Mile area. He was a very urban rapper. He was embraced by the hip hop community. Very talented guy. Came up with Dr. Dre, who Dr. Dre is one of the legendary rappers. Came back from back in the day with NWA, which was a group called Niggas with Attitude. So he'd been using that word. I mean, he's part of the community that uses that word a lot. It's used in hip hop lyrics. It's used in urban culture. That's where it's used the most. But he, I think, has gone down saying he's not going to say that word about other people. He's not going to use that word about other people. But I've heard people in the African American community who use that term to talk about people who aren't white. That's my nigga, that's my friend. Or they hear it being used by people who aren't white and they don't flip out. There's certain rappers who aren't black. I mean, that's the thing, who aren't black in that situation, aren't white. But there's certain rappers and certain people, certain other people who aren't white who use that term who don't get as negative as the reaction. I personally thought if anyone has the right to use that term, Eminem probably has way more bona fides to use that term than I did. I definitely think he had way more bona fides to use that term than this random guy in that I just met the day before that has never been to the United States of America had to just yell that word at me. I'm like, okay, first of all, what's the cultural background for you saying this? Just because you have black skin, that's why you're saying that term? And to me, that's thinking, that's a kind of privilege. If that guy was like some white European groundskeeper, would he have just yelled that word at me and expected me to just react in the same way? I was more offended, like, you're not my friend. You can't, don't call me that. I don't know who you are. And that's the thing. That's why I'm showing there's a black privilege there. And then that instant reaction for me hearing that word, of hearing like, oh, is somebody trying to attack me? That's the proof of the black oppression, where that term itself still is being embodied with this power. So what is it about that term? Why is it that some people see if somebody's just simply has the black skin, they can use this term, yet somebody simply having the white skin, they can't use that term? Then also, why is that word that strong? Why is that word that powerful? Because the group it's referring to, the way people look at that group has definitely changed. The way people look at what was done to that group has definitely changed. I mean, I think it comes from people admitting that, yes, this term was used in a negative way and we're trying to do something with it. Now, what's going to be done with it, I don't know. As I said, I don't really like that N-word thing because that's saying I'm not going to say the term, but when I say it, you're going to say it in your mind, you're going to think it in your mind. So it's so offensive for me to not say it, but it's not so offensive that I can't make you think that word or try to encourage you to think that word in your mind. Okay, so there's going to be definitions to the article about in dictionary.com about the word below. You can find those below. And the roots of the term, it comes from the early use of the French word negre or negro in Spanish. And it was developed, it was definitely developed in a time when there was a widespread acknowledgement within people that black people from Africa, were lesser people. So I get where it comes from. But what is that word now? How many people are using that word now? Is it quite, I don't want to say appropriate, but what does it do to say, back then, this is a term that one group of people used to call one group of people, and it was a horrible term to use that way. But now, it's one group of people calling one group of people, yet if it's used by anybody else, it's a horrible thing. Should we get to the point where that term is horrible and we understand, at least this I think would be my preference, we understand that term was horrible, we only use it in a situation where it's, in its sense, where it was used to harm people, it was used to hurt people. And I still think continuing to use it in that term, continuing to limit it to a certain group of people, calling a certain other group of people, Either make it a situation where everybody uses it or nobody uses it. Then what do you count for the places that never really had the background to deal with that word? So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? It was just, I'm trying to think of a through line here on this on this video, but put those two videos out there. Try to encourage people to actually talk and see and look at that word in a different way, because I've been trying to understand what my feelings are on that term. I don't use it that often, and as I mentioned, I talked to one of my friends who's African American, and I was like, yeah, what do you think about this video? I was going to say nigger instead of nigga, and he was like, yeah, probably use nigga because that's the actual way that it's used more in common parlance. Maybe in a couple of years, maybe in a couple of generations, and that term will just go out of use completely. But as you can see here, it's actually came from the word negra or negro, which is just more towards defining this, because people still say negro in the skin color in the ebony type sense. So I don't know. I don't know about this term. It's a really frustrating term. It's unfortunate that that term came to be. I think it's more unfortunate that it's still being used in the sense that it is. Don't know exactly how, but that's part of why I'm making these videos. That's part of why I'm trying to develop these ideas and see what you guys think and try to work this out on my own as well. So any comments in below would be appreciated. If you guys have any thoughts or have any experiences of when this term has been used, maybe against you, or if you've used it. Like another weird thing is like people who are singing rap songs, they kind of feel like I can't say this term, or like they'll say it when there's no one else around, but they're just saying it because somebody else said it. Is that you saying it? But yeah, let me know. Like, share, and subscribe. Until next video, thanks for listening. Again, apologies for anybody who might be offended by this stuff. And, yeah, till next video. Goodbye.